We interrupt all programming. This is a national emergency. Important instructions will follow. This is not a test. Attention, citizens of the United States. This is a government-issued broadcast under the authority of National Order Directive 13. As of 7 p.m., all national legal protections are temporarily suspended for a period of 12 hours. During this window, all acts previously classified as criminal, including property destruction, assault, and homicide, are no longer subject to prosecution. Firearms and personal defense items of Tier 4 and below are approved for use. Unauthorized weapons or explosives remain forbidden. Senior federal officials, registered under Class 1 immunity, are excluded from participation and must not be harmed under penalty of death. Police, fire, and emergency services will remain offline until the directive expires at 7 a.m. This is not a drill. Proceed with caution. Secure your location. Trust no one. The directive has begun. Interrupt all programming. This is a national emergency. Important instructions will follow. This is not a test. Attention, citizens of the United States. This is a government-issued broadcast under the authority of National Order Directive 13. As of 7 p.m., all national legal protections are temporarily suspended for a period of 12 hours. During this window, all acts previously classified as criminal, including property destruction, assault, and homicide, are no longer subject to prosecution. Firearms and personal defense items of Tier 4 and below are approved for use. Unauthorized weapons or explosives remain forbidden. Senior federal officials, registered under Class 1 immunity, are excluded from participation and must not be harmed under penalty of death. Police, fire, and emergency services will remain offline until the directive expires at 7 a.m. This is not a drill. Proceed with caution. Secure your location. Trust no one. The directive has begun. As the clock struck 7, the nation entered 12 hours unlike any other. Across the United States, cities, towns, and rural communities were swept into a wave of unrestrained violence and chaos. In metropolitan hubs, the pulse of normal life ceased instantly. Surveillance systems shut down or were sabotaged, leaving entire neighborhoods in darkness. Power outages affected large areas, plunging streets into blackness, save for the flickering light of fires set by roving groups. Looting erupted swiftly. Shops and businesses that had stood for decades were stripped bare within minutes. Vehicles were hijacked or torched to block roads, creating makeshift barricades that prevented any form of organized response. Violence escalated rapidly from theft to assault and murder. Reports from multiple states indicated that organized gangs took control of large urban districts, enforcing brutal rules and punishing dissent with immediate and often lethal force. Outside the cities, smaller communities and suburbs were not spared. Homes were broken into. Families barricaded themselves indoors, often unable to communicate with the outside world. Emergency lines were overwhelmed or disconnected. The government's promise of immunity for certain officials was enforced with lethal precision, as security details moved to protect key personnel in undisclosed locations. These measures, however, did little to quell the widespread destruction occurring elsewhere. Hospitals shut down, unable to operate without power or staff. Fire departments, unable to respond, watched helplessly as fires consumed residential blocks and commercial centers alike. Throughout the night, the airwaves were filled with sporadic, static-laden broadcasts from citizens and local stations, desperate to report conditions or plead for help. Most messages ended abruptly or in silence. The psychological toll was profound. Fear, paranoia, and rage spread as neighbors turned against neighbors. The social fabric unraveled, revealing deep fractures within communities and families. By the early morning hours, streets bore the marks of conflict. Shattered glass, overturned cars, smoldering ruins, and bodies left where they fell. The purge was intended as a sanctioned release valve, but instead, it ignited a night of unrelenting carnage that would leave scars far deeper than any official report could measure. When dawn finally broke, the country awoke not to a return to order, but to the harsh reality of a society forever altered. As the purge night unfolded, reports began streaming in from cities across the United States. Fires, armed clashes, and widespread destruction marked the early hours. Localized groups seized control of neighborhoods, turning streets into battlegrounds. Communication lines faltered, and isolation spread rapidly. Here are some of the first confirmed incidents from major urban centers. In Chicago, the South Side rapidly descended into controlled chaos as well-armed groups seized entire neighborhoods. Fires broke out across abandoned industrial areas, sending thick smoke billowing into the night sky and reducing visibility for miles. Streets were blocked by overturned vehicles used as barricades, cutting off any chance of escape or outside intervention. New York City saw fierce clashes between rival factions battling for dominance in Manhattan's commercial districts. A residential high-rise in Brooklyn was consumed by flames, with multiple casualties reported. Bridges connecting the Bronx and Queens were intentionally obstructed by burning cars, isolating entire boroughs. Communications were intermittent as many lost contact with the outside world. Miami's downtown and beach areas became scenes of rampant looting and sporadic armed confrontations. Despite natural water barriers, some groups employed boats to maneuver supplies and weapons. Armed conflicts erupted near the international airport, with heavy exchanges of fire and attempts to secure strategic positions. Los Angeles neighborhoods experienced widespread violence as gangs expanded their influence amid the absence of law enforcement. Fires broke out in both residential and commercial zones, while major freeways were blocked by wrecked vehicles, halting movement across the city. The blackout deepened the sense of isolation and lawlessness. Atlanta's suburbs were shaken by numerous break-ins and sustained gunfire near key highways. Emergency communication towers were vandalized or destroyed, cutting off many from any form of assistance. Tensions ran high as neighbors turned suspicious and hostile toward one another. San Francisco faced a wave of vandalism and arson, particularly in the Mission and Tenderloin districts. Looting was widespread, with violent encounters reported between competing groups vying for control. The Golden Gate Bridge remained under heavy surveillance, with restricted access amid fears of further unrest. As dawn breaks over the United States, the full extent of the Purge's impact becomes evident. Cities lie scarred by fire, debris, and shattered glass. Streets once bustling with life now stand eerily silent, punctuated only by the distant sounds of emergency responders cautiously returning to the scene. In Chicago, widespread destruction has left entire neighborhoods unrecognizable. Power outages persist across large sections, complicating restoration efforts. Emergency crews face blocked roads and volatile conditions as they work to restore order. New York's metropolitan area reports significant casualties and infrastructure damage. Several residential blocks remain inaccessible due to fire damage and security concerns. Communication networks operate at limited capacity, hindering coordination. Miami's coastal districts show signs of looting aftermath and structural damage. Authorities have begun to enforce curfews as tensions remain high. Patrols are active near critical transport hubs, including the international airport, to prevent further chaos. Los Angeles grapples with ongoing blackouts and transportation blockades. Cleanup operations have commenced, but the threat of renewed violence keeps officials on high alert. Community centers are opening as temporary shelters for displaced residents. Atlanta experiences a slow restoration of essential services, though communication disruptions continue in suburban zones. Reports of ongoing localized violence prompt increased law enforcement presence. San Francisco's downtown core reflects the visible scars of last night's unrest. Public transit remains suspended indefinitely, with infrastructure assessments underway. Security forces maintain tight control over key bridges and thoroughfares. The nation faces a long and difficult recovery ahead. The government urges all citizens to remain vigilant and cooperate with authorities as order is gradually restored. In the wake of the Purge, communities across the nation face profound social upheaval. Families mourn lost loved ones, their grief compounded by the abruptness and brutality of the violence. The collective trauma is palpable, manifesting in widespread anxiety, distrust, and despair. Neighborhoods once unified now fracture along lines of suspicion and fear. Long-standing tensions between different groups intensify, fueled by accusations of betrayal, collaboration, or exploitation during the chaos. In some areas, vigilante justice has taken hold, further complicating efforts to restore peace. Survival has become a daily struggle. Basic resources, food, water, medicine, are scarce in many communities, forcing individuals to make difficult choices. Many survivors report heightened vigilance and isolation, wary of both strangers and former neighbors. Psychological scars linger beyond physical wounds. Mental health services, already strained, are overwhelmed by increased demand. The government encourages citizens to seek help, though access remains limited due to damaged infrastructure and ongoing security concerns. As the nation begins to reckon with the consequences of this sanctioned violence, the question remains: what will the fabric of society look like once the dust settles? For now, survival means adapting to a new and uncertain reality. In the immediate aftermath of the Purge night, government agencies at federal, state, and local levels launched extensive operations to regain control and restore public order. National Guard units were deployed in major metropolitan areas to assist overwhelmed local law enforcement. Roadblocks and checkpoints were established around affected zones to regulate movement and prevent renewed violence. Curfews were imposed in cities with the highest levels of unrest, restricting all non-essential activity after sunset. Emergency communications centers coordinated closely with hospitals, fire departments, and utility companies to prioritize restoration of critical infrastructure, including electricity, water, and telecommunications. Efforts to clear blocked roads and extinguish widespread fires began as soon as it was deemed safe. Official government statements underscored the purge as a necessary, albeit difficult, measure, intended to reduce long-term crime rates and alleviate systemic social pressures. Representatives stressed the importance of public cooperation in the recovery phase, emphasizing that the rule of law would be swiftly reasserted, and those responsible for excessive violence would face prosecution. Despite these reassurances, criticism and controversy quickly emerged. Civil rights groups condemned the policy as fundamentally unjust, pointing to evidence that marginalized communities bore the brunt of violence and destruction. Allegations surfaced regarding selective immunity granted to government officials and certain privileged classes, fueling perceptions of inequality and corruption. Media outlets reported on numerous instances where law enforcement agencies were accused of turning a blind eye during the Purge, raising concerns about accountability and oversight. Calls for independent investigations into the Purge's implementation and its aftermath grew louder in both political and public spheres. Public trust in government institutions showed signs of erosion, with polls indicating rising skepticism about official narratives and policies. Activists organized protests demanding transparency, reparations for victims, and a re-evaluation of the Purge as a state-sanctioned event. In response, government officials promised reviews and reforms, but reiterated their commitment to maintaining national stability. Emergency funding was allocated for reconstruction projects, mental health services, and community support programs aimed at healing divisions exacerbated by the Purge. As the nation grapples with the consequences of this unprecedented event, the government's capacity to manage both the immediate crisis and the long-term fallout remains under intense scrutiny. The balance between security, justice, and civil liberties hangs in a delicate and uncertain state. In the days following the Purge, public discourse remains deeply divided. For some, the event is seen as a necessary reset, a brutal but effective method to cleanse society of its built-up tensions and criminal elements. Proponents argue that the Purge offers a chance to break destructive cycles, forcing communities to confront uncomfortable truths and rebuild from the ashes. Supporters praise the reduction in reported crime rates in the weeks preceding the Purge, pointing to improved economic indicators and social order in certain regions. Some politicians and commentators frame the Purge as the foundation for a stronger, more resilient nation, one that can finally address entrenched problems without bureaucratic delays. Conversely, many citizens and organizations reject this narrative outright. To them, the Purge is a senseless tragedy, a state-sanctioned eruption of violence that only deepened societal wounds. Survivors recount stories of loss, betrayal, and shattered trust that linger long after the sirens have faded. Critics highlight the disproportionate impact on marginalized and vulnerable populations, arguing that the Purge exacerbates inequality and injustice. They warn of long-term psychological damage and the erosion of communal bonds, emphasizing that violence cannot be a foundation for lasting peace. This polarization has spilled into media, politics, and everyday conversations. Heated debates, protests, and clashes between opposing factions have become common. Communities are grappling not only with physical rebuilding, but also with the challenge of reconciling fundamentally different visions for the country's future. As the nation stands at this crossroads, the question remains: will the Purge be remembered as a catalyst for renewal or a dark chapter of irreparable harm? The path forward is uncertain, shaped by competing voices and the collective will of the people. The government has officially announced plans for the upcoming Purge cycle, set to take place next year. This edition will feature significant changes, including an extended duration and the introduction of new authorized activities and regulations. Officials emphasize that these adjustments aim to enhance the Purge's intended social reset effect, while maintaining public safety to the greatest extent possible. The use of additional classes of weapons will be permitted, alongside stricter immunity clauses for select government personnel. In a surprise announcement, multiple coordinated events are planned across key urban centers, designed to both challenge and test community resilience under the Purge framework. These include designated zones with increased enforcement presence and sanctioned containment operations to manage unruly behavior. The announcement has sparked widespread controversy. Critics warn that expanding the scope and scale of the Purge risks deepening social fractures and increasing casualties. Questions regarding transparency, ethical considerations, and the potential for abuse have fueled public protests and heated debates. Public opinion remains sharply divided. Some see the new measures as a necessary evolution, capable of addressing the nation's ongoing struggles. Others view the developments as a dangerous escalation, undermining civil liberties and endangering vulnerable populations. As tensions mount, authorities urge calm and cooperation, reaffirming their commitment to restoring and maintaining order. The nation braces for another chapter in this contentious and unprecedented social experiment. As the sirens finally fall silent and the dawn breaks over a nation forever changed, the true aftermath of the Purge begins. The streets bear the marks of violence and destruction, but deeper scars have been etched into the fabric of society itself. Scars of loss, fear, and mistrust. Families are shattered, communities divided, and the fragile bonds that hold the nation together are tested as never before. Some see hope in the promise of renewal, believing this brutal trial may forge a stronger, more resilient society. Others only see tragedy, a senseless night of suffering that has widened the gaps between social classes and left many questioning the very foundations of justice and humanity. What remains certain is that the Purge is no longer just a single event. It has become a defining force shaping the future of this country. With the announcement of the next, even more intense cycle, the questions grow louder. Can a society truly be cleansed through sanctioned chaos? Will the cycle of violence ever end? Or is this only the beginning of a new and uncertain chapter in the nation's history? The answers lie ahead in the days, months, and years to come. For now, the nation holds its breath, waiting, watching, and wondering what the next purge will bring. You're listening to Frequency 404. Tonight, we bear witness to a turning point in Canadian history. The very first purge. It's February 28th, 2026. The snow hasn't stopped falling all week, blanketing the streets of Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver in white silence. But tonight, it feels heavier. For the first time in Canada's history, the government has declared a purge, 12 hours where all crime, including murder, is legal. A national experiment, they called it, a solution to rising anger, inequality, and violence. Many still can't believe it's real. Yet here we are, counting down the final minutes before midnight. No one knows what to expect. In Ottawa, Parliament is sealed tight. Politicians who passed this law have already vanished into secure bunkers, leaving the rest of the country to fend for itself. Toronto is tense. The financial district stands dark, high-rise condos boarded up from inside. Families in the suburbs have barricaded doors, sealed windows, and prayed this night will pass quietly. Police cars sit abandoned in their stations. Hospitals lock their doors. And still, no one knows what will happen. On social media, hashtags trend. #Stay Safe Canada, #First Purge. Live streams show empty streets, nervous faces, people clutching baseball bats and hunting rifles. Grocery stores have been stripped bare. Gas stations long out of fuel. But there's another side too. Not everyone is afraid. Across the country, people who feel ignored, betrayed, or broken by the system say tonight is their chance to strike back. In the back alleys of Montreal, men and women in masks whisper and laugh, carrying weapons they've hidden all their lives. In Vancouver, The downtown east side simmers with desperation, and in the vast north, old rivalries between families and neighbors come to the surface after decades of quiet. The government promised this would bring balance, that society would heal itself after just one night of darkness. But no one knows if that's true. Not yet. As midnight nears, a government voice crackles over every radio, every screen. Citizens of Canada. The purge will commence in 5 minutes. All emergency services are hereby suspended. May God be with you all. The sirens begin to wail, long, low notes that ripple across the frozen land. In homes, families clutch each other tight. In alleyways, groups stand ready to move. In the snow, in the silence, everyone waits. And then, nothing. The clock strikes midnight, and across Canada, a breath is held, hearts pound, and the first screams shatter the night. Midnight has come and gone. The sirens have faded, replaced by screams, gunfire, and the crackle of fire echoing across quiet streets. And already, the country has split into two. On one side stand those who take to the streets, the hunters. They come from all walks of life. In downtown Toronto, young men in hockey masks patrol Yonge Street in pickup trucks, shouting and firing into shop windows. Many have waited months for this. Men and women who felt powerless now claim the night as theirs. Some wear military surplus and carry rifles bought legally long ago, convinced they're cleansing society of its worst. In Montreal, gangs have turned entire neighborhoods into their hunting grounds, tagging walls with blood-red graffiti and barricading streets to keep out rivals. Even in quiet small towns on the prairies, vigilantes roam from farm to farm, settling feuds no court ever touched. Some say it's justice, others say it's madness. But tonight, they are the ones writing the rules. And then, on the other side, are those who refuse, the survivors. In Mississauga and Brampton, families crowd into basements, hiding behind couches and mattresses, whispering prayers. In Montreal, old port residents huddle in shuttered stone buildings, candles flickering in the dark. Vancouver's West End has become a maze of barricaded apartments, neighbors working together to block stairwells and share supplies. Not all of them believe in the purge. Some say it's barbaric, against everything Canada is supposed to stand for. Others simply can't bring themselves to kill, even now. And then there are those caught in between. The delivery driver in Edmonton who couldn't get home in time and now hides under his truck, hoping to go unnoticed. The teenager in Quebec City who left to join his friends but froze on the first corner, unable to swing the bat in his hand. The elderly woman in Saskatoon who opened her door to strangers, not knowing if they would protect her or turn on her. Across Canada, the lines have been drawn, but even now, they shift. Some who hid are lured out by anger. Some hunters stop in horror at what they've done, and some discover parts of themselves they never thought existed. It has only been 60 minutes since the sirens stopped, and already, the streets of Canada look nothing like the country they once were. At 12:01, the first shots rang out on Yonge Street in Toronto. A convenience store owner was dragged into the snow by masked men who smashed through his window before he even had time to lock the door. Minutes later, flames rose from an abandoned car downtown, the fire lighting up the silent towers like a warning. In Montreal, two rival crews collided almost instantly. The Saint-Henri district erupted in gunfire as young men in balaclavas stormed a row of cafes, spraying bullets into the dark. Elsewhere in the city, Old Port burned. Molotov cocktails lit up the cobblestones while looters swarmed high-end boutiques, shattering glass and carrying what they could before vanishing back into the alleys. Vancouver was quicker still. Within the first 5 minutes, the downtown east side was chaos. Fires, screams, and clashes between desperate groups fighting over a single shelter that hadn't locked its doors in time. In the West End, a high-rise was overrun by a masked gang who kicked in door after door, dragging residents out into the hallway and marking their apartments with red paint. And outside the cities, the first hour was even colder. On the prairies, barns burned, their owners chased into the night by neighbors who had waited years for this moment. In the north, snowmobiles streaked across the tundra in the dark, two families settling a grudge that no police had ever managed to solve. Even in quiet suburbs, fathers stood at windows clutching baseball bats as intruders circled their homes, testing locks and peering through cracks. For many, the first hour was confusion, panic. People caught outside ran for any door that would open. A jogger in Calgary was found dead in the park, her headphones still playing. A teenager in Quebec City was shot through the window of his room while filming a live stream. And dozens of others were caught in crossfire they never saw coming. By the end of the hour, fires burned across half a dozen cities. Hospitals stood silent. Emergency calls went unanswered. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Strangers struck without warning, and the air was already heavy with smoke. Dawn breaks quietly, as if nothing happened. The snow falls lighter now, covering streets, buildings, and memories alike. Canada wakes to a silence deeper than before, but not the same kind of silence. At exactly noon, the sirens signaled the end of the Purge. Across the country, those who took part dropped their weapons and disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the aftermath. Neighbors opened doors cautiously, stepping into streets littered with shattered glass, spent shells, and reminders of the night's chaos. Preliminary estimates from authorities report that over 150 lives were lost nationwide, with hundreds more impacted by injuries of varying severity. Property damage is staggering, with over 1,200 buildings affected across urban and rural areas, many severely damaged or destroyed. Tens of thousands of Canadians were displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in emergency shelters and with relatives. The wave of crime extended beyond violence. Authorities confirmed that at least 2 major banks were breached during the night, with losses estimated to exceed $1 million. Additionally, thousands of thefts and burglaries were reported nationwide, with stores, homes, and vehicles targeted amid the chaos. But numbers alone cannot capture the deeper wounds. Broken families, fractured communities, and a country forever changed. On official broadcasts, the government calls the first purge a success, citing reductions in crime and a renewed order. But for those who lived through it, it feels like something fragile has been shattered. Families avert their eyes from one another. Neighbors no longer exchange greetings. Children hesitate to play outside. There is a new coldness in the air, one the snow cannot conceal. And yet, everyone knows this was only the beginning. The first purge has come and gone, but the echoes of outrage remain loud and clear, both within Canada and across the globe. Inside the country, citizens from all walks of life question the wisdom of allowing 12 hours of lawlessness. For many Canadians, this experiment feels like a step backward, a dark rewind to a time when chaos ruled unchecked, before justice and order prevailed. Across social media platforms, hashtags like #NoPurgeCanada and #StopTheChaos trend relentlessly. Families share stories of loss and fear, doctors describe the overwhelming pressure on emergency rooms, and community leaders condemn the violence as a betrayal of Canadian values. Political opponents and human rights groups have called for immediate repeal, warning that the purge only deepens divisions and sows long-lasting trauma. It makes no sense, says one activist. We're supposed to be a civilized nation. This feels like we're rewinding history, not moving forward. International reactions have been no less severe. Allies and critics alike express shock and disbelief. Editorials from major newspapers around the world describe Canada's decision as reckless and inhumane, raising questions about the nation's future on the global stage. Some experts warn that the purge sets a dangerous precedent, one that could inspire similar policies elsewhere, threatening to unravel decades of progress in law, order, and human rights. Amid the criticism, government officials defend the decision, insisting it's necessary to reset the social balance and reduce crime in the long term. Yet, the public's faith is shaken, and the scars of the first night will not heal easily. For many Canadians, the purge feels less like a solution and more like a descent into uncertainty, a night that should never have been allowed. In the wake of the first purge, the country is shaken to its core. The public outcry, both loud and widespread, has forced the government to reconsider the future of this controversial experiment. Parliament has announced that a nationwide referendum will be held in the coming months, a direct vote by Canadian citizens on whether the purge should become an annual event or be permanently abolished. The debate is fierce. Supporters argue that despite the costs, the purge offers a way to reset society, release built-up tensions, and ultimately reduce crime. They point to official statements citing initial decreases in crime rates and promise reforms to better manage the process if it continues. Opponents counter that the purge has torn the social fabric apart, leaving deep scars and fear that will take generations to heal. They emphasize the human cost, the lost lives, the trauma, the destruction, arguing that no measure of order justifies such chaos. Communities across the country are mobilizing. Town halls and online forums buzz with discussions. Protests erupt in some cities, while in others, cautious optimism lingers. Media outlets cover the issue non-stop, airing stories from survivors, experts, and political leaders. International observers watch closely, recognizing that Canada's decision could signal a global shift in how societies handle crime and justice. For many Canadians, the upcoming vote feels like more than a political decision. It's a moment to decide what kind of country they want to be. Will they choose a path of controlled chaos, hoping for a better tomorrow? Or will they reject the purge and strive for peace through other means? The future hangs in the balance. The first purge in Canada left more than just shattered glass and burned buildings. It tore at the fabric of communities, leaving deep wounds that won't heal quickly. In towns and cities alike, people face the slow and difficult process of rebuilding. Not just structures, but trust, safety, and hope. Neighborhood watch groups have formed, fueled by a shared determination to protect what remains. Volunteers gather to clear debris, repair homes, and support those displaced. But the scars run deeper than visible damage. Survivors speak quietly of fear that refuses to fade, of nights haunted by memories, and of a country that feels less familiar. Mental health services are overwhelmed as counselors and therapists struggle to meet the rising demand. Families grieve quietly, some never fully recovering from the loss of loved ones. Parents wrestle with how to explain the night's horrors to children, while schools try to offer safe spaces amid lingering anxiety. Yet amidst the darkness, flickers of resilience appear. Community centers organize events to bring people together, to remind them of shared strength and solidarity. Stories emerge of neighbors helping neighbors, of strangers risking their safety to protect others. National leaders have pledged support for recovery efforts, but many say true healing will require more than aid. It will demand a reckoning with what allowed this night to happen in the first place. Canada stands at a crossroads, forced to confront the cost of the purge, and to ask whether the path forward lies in division or unity. The night of the purge has passed. Communities are rebuilding. Laws may change, but the shadows remain. Canada wakes to a world forever altered, where the line between order and chaos blurred for one long night. Some call it a necessary reset. Others see a fracture that may never mend. There is no clear answer. Will the purge become a ritual etched into the nation's fabric, or a dark chapter soon closed? Will people learn to live with the fear it brought, or find ways to heal beyond it? Across the country, faces show weariness and resolve. Children ask questions their parents struggle to answer. Streets once vibrant now hold echoes of silence and memories too heavy to forget. The future is unwritten, and in that uncertainty lies both fear and possibility. The chance for change, for reckoning, for something new. It's the year 2030, and across the United Kingdom, an uneasy tension fills the air. Only a few hours remain before the nation's first ever purge begins. A radical social experiment set to last 6 hours, during which nearly all crime will be legal. Since the announcement, the country has been gripped by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and disbelief. Governments, media, and citizens alike have debated fiercely about what this night will bring. In London streets, shop windows are boarded up, families lock their doors, and neighborhoods brace for the unknown. In quieter towns, the silence is thick, almost surreal, as if the whole nation is holding its breath. The government insists this is only a trial, a controlled test to measure the social impact, with strict rules in place to prevent certain extreme acts and protect essential services. Still, the idea of legal chaos, even for 6 hours, has many questioning their safety and morality. Emergency services have been put on limited alert. Police officers and paramedics stand ready but largely powerless to intervene unless absolutely necessary. Hospitals prepare for a surge in casualties, unsure what to expect. Inside homes, people prepare differently. Some stockpile supplies, board up windows, or set up security cameras. Others gather in groups, hoping safety lies in numbers. Still, many plan to stay awake all night, glued to news channels and social media, waiting to see how this first purge will unfold. The media runs live countdowns. Experts debate whether this experiment could reduce crime in the long run, or instead unleash uncontrollable violence that scars the nation. Voices of dissent rise. Human rights groups, faith leaders, and everyday citizens pleading for calm, for reconsideration, for mercy. But the government remains firm. The clock ticks down. 6 hours. This is the dawn of a new era. An era where laws are suspended and humanity's darkest instincts are set free. As the sun sets, the nation braces for what could be the longest 6 hours of its life, and no one knows who will survive the night. The idea seemed unthinkable just a decade ago. A nation known for its laws, order, and respect for justice now on the brink of legal chaos, even if only for a few hours. But behind the headlines and debates, the government's decision was shaped by years of mounting pressure. Crime rates had been climbing steadily throughout the 2020s. Violent incidents, property crimes, and social unrest stretched law enforcement thin. Economic challenges worsened the situation. Rising unemployment, inflation, and inequality fed frustration in communities across the country. Politicians faced growing criticism, accusations that the system was failing. The traditional methods of crime prevention were no longer enough. Against this backdrop, some officials began exploring radical solutions. One proposal gained unusual traction: a temporary suspension of laws to allow people to vent their anger, to purge their frustrations, with the hope that controlled chaos might reduce crime in the long term. The theory was controversial. Critics called it dangerous, reckless, and morally wrong. Supporters argued it was a bold experiment, a reset button for a society on edge. In the months leading up to 2030, intense debates filled parliamentary chambers, media outlets, and public forums. Safety measures were proposed. The purge would last only 6 hours. Key emergency services would remain operational, and certain severe crimes would still be prohibited. The government promised transparency and strict oversight, but the decision shocked many. The announcement was made with a mix of caution and conviction. "We must face hard truths," the Prime Minister said in a national address. "Our society is at a crossroads. This trial is an attempt to reclaim control and restore peace." The nation was divided. Some hoped for change, others feared destruction. And so, as the clock ticks toward the first purge night, the UK prepares to test the limits of law, order, and humanity itself. The countdown nears its final moments. 10 minutes remain before the nation plunges into 6 hours of lawlessness, the first ever purge night in UK history. Across cities and towns, the streets have fallen eerily silent. Some people hurry to finish boarding windows, double-check locks, and gather family members. Others stand frozen, staring out into the darkness, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. Police officers remove their badges and radios, handing over weapons and stepping away from their posts. Emergency calls are routed to special crisis teams, but official intervention is suspended. In homes, last messages are sent, calls made, whispers of love, apologies, or promises to survive the night. News anchors count down with grim faces, reminding citizens of the rules and restrictions still in place. No attacks on emergency personnel, no use of heavy explosives, and no violence against minors. Social media buzzes with a strange mixture of panic and curiosity. Some post their plans to stay safe. Others threaten to take advantage of the chaos. Street cameras shut down one by one, as surveillance systems go offline in preparation for the purge. The city lights dim in many neighborhoods as residents turn off power to avoid attracting attention. From underground bunkers to high-rise apartments, the collective heartbeat of the nation speeds up. The final moments before midnight feel suspended in time, a fragile pause before the storm. And then, as the clock strikes 12, everything changes. The Purge begins. Midnight strikes, and the city transforms. The usual hum of daily life is replaced by a tense, uneasy silence, quickly shattered by the distant sound of sirens, breaking glass, and shouted threats. The first wave of chaos sweeps through the streets. Some neighborhoods descend into anarchy as groups take advantage of the lawless hours to settle old scores, loot, or simply act on impulses long suppressed. Businesses shuttered just moments ago find their windows smashed, stores emptied of goods in frantic raids. Cars speed recklessly through darkened roads, horns blaring in a chaotic symphony. Police stations, now abandoned or understaffed, become targets of opportunistic attacks. Yet amid the violence, there are pockets of calm. Communities banding together, boarding windows and watching vigilantly from behind barricades. In homes, families clutch each other tightly, listening to the turmoil outside and praying for dawn. Hospitals brace for an influx of injuries. Their emergency rooms overwhelmed but staffed by workers who cannot intervene in many situations due to the purge rules. Social media explodes with frantic messages, live streams, and desperate calls for help. Some individuals use the night to commit dark deeds, while others wrestle with their conscience, questioning the morality of what unfolds. For many, the initial hours are a brutal awakening, a glimpse into humanity stripped bare of laws and civility. As the minutes tick by, the question remains: how much damage will 6 hours of unchecked freedom bring? The clock creeps closer to dawn, but the chaos shows no sign of slowing. For some, the first few hours were a frenzy of violence, raw, unfiltered, almost primal. Now, exhaustion sets in. The adrenaline fades, replaced by a heavy weariness that drapes over the streets like a suffocating fog. Desperation takes hold. In shattered neighborhoods, the wounded crawl through rubble, searching for help that may never come. Families huddle in dark corners, clutching what little they have left. Voices tremble with fear or plead for mercy, echoing in the empty shells of once vibrant homes. Some who had hoped to use the purge as a release find themselves trapped by the consequences, injured, hunted, or haunted by regret. Stories begin to surface of people who tried to protect loved ones, of neighbors who betrayed each other, of silent heroes risking everything to shield the vulnerable. In the shadows, despair battles with the faintest sparks of hope. For many, the night has become a crucible, a test of survival, morality, and humanity. As the final minutes approach, questions linger in the air. Who will emerge from this night changed? Who will carry the scars, visible or hidden, into the light of a new day? And will the price of this experiment be worth the hope of a better future? As dawn breaks over the United Kingdom, the nation awakens to a changed world. The 6 hours of lawlessness have ended, but their echoes linger everywhere. Streets are littered with broken glass, burnt-out vehicles, and the debris of shattered lives. Communities mourn losses both seen and unseen. Families torn apart, friendships broken, trust shattered. The government releases initial reports, cautiously optimistic, yet unable to hide the severity of the damage. Crime statistics show a sharp spike during the purge hours. Injuries, robberies, and even deaths that will take years to fully comprehend. Emergency services begin a massive cleanup and recovery operation, working around the clock to restore order and provide aid. Politicians face fierce scrutiny. Supporters argue the experiment was necessary, a painful but effective measure to relieve societal pressures. Critics condemn it as a reckless gamble that endangered countless lives and deepened social divides. Public opinion is fractured. Some call for a halt to future purges. Others demand the government double down and make the event a permanent fixture. Mental health professionals warn of the long-term psychological toll on survivors, while communities grapple with the moral questions raised by sanctioned chaos. Yet amid the ruins, seeds of resilience begin to sprout. Neighborhood groups organize to rebuild and protect. Leaders vow to learn from the trial and find ways to prevent future violence without sacrificing humanity. The Purge experiment may be over for now, but its consequences will shape the United Kingdom's future for years to come. The morning after the first purge, the country listens intently as the Prime Minister steps up to the podium for a live broadcast. Her face is grave but resolute. Behind her, the flags flutter solemnly in the wind, a symbol of unity amid turmoil. "My fellow citizens," she begins, "last night marked a historic moment for our nation. A bold and unprecedented experiment aimed at addressing the deep-rooted challenges we face." She acknowledges the pain and suffering endured during the 6 hours of lawlessness. "We are deeply aware of the fear, the losses, and the trauma many have experienced. No one underestimates the weight of these hours." But she stresses the government's commitment to transparency and careful evaluation. "In the coming 6 months, we will rigorously monitor crime rates, social impacts, and the well-being of our communities. Independent experts, law enforcement agencies, and health professionals will work together to analyze the data. Based on these findings, we will make an informed decision on whether further editions of the Purge are appropriate, and under what conditions." She calls on citizens to stay engaged, to voice their concerns, and to help heal the wounds left behind. This is a moment for reflection, for dialogue, and for collective responsibility. The speech closes with a message of cautious hope. "We face uncertain times, but together we will find a way forward, stronger, wiser, and united." As the broadcast ends, the nation remains suspended between fear and hope, waiting to see what the future holds. Prime Minister's address echoed through every home, every screen, and every radio across the UK. In living rooms, pubs, and on crowded streets, people gathered to discuss the speech, some with cautious optimism, others with lingering fear and anger. Sarah, a mother from Birmingham, sighed deeply after watching the broadcast. "I appreciate the honesty, but how do you explain the trauma my kids went through last night? 6 hours felt like a lifetime of terror." In contrast, Mark, a young man from Manchester, saw a glimmer of hope. "Maybe this is what it takes to shake things up. I just hope they really listen to the experts before making any more decisions." Social media exploded with debates. Hashtags both supporting and condemning the purge trended for days. Some called for the government to scrap the experiment altogether, while others argued it was a necessary step toward reform. Newspapers ran front-page editorials. One headline read, "A risk too great, the cost of chaos." Another proclaimed, "A nation tested, can the purge heal or hurt UK?" Community leaders and activists organized forums, urging calm and constructive dialogue. Faith groups held vigils for victims and families, calling for peace and reconciliation. Meanwhile, crime analysts and mental health professionals prepared detailed reports, eager to present data that could shape the nation's path. The country stood at a crossroads, a society forced to confront its darkest impulses and decide what kind of future it wanted to build. Amid uncertainty, one truth remained clear. The conversation had only just begun. In an attempt to quell rising crime and social unrest, the government dared to experiment with something unprecedented, a night where the usual rules no longer apply. But as the dust of that first purge settles, a troubling truth emerges. Trying to fight darkness with darkness only deepens the shadows. Rather than curbing violence, the lawless hours appear to have emboldened those willing to cross moral lines. What was meant to release tension instead unleashed cycles of fear, anger, and retribution that ripple far beyond those 6 hours. Families were torn apart, communities fractured, and trust eroded. The very fabric of society strained under the weight of sanctioned chaos. It has become clear that pain cannot be purged by more pain. Injustice cannot be corrected through acts that themselves deny justice. While some see the purge as a necessary evil, many now question if such measures only serve to encourage the very behavior they claim to suppress. This experiment stands as a stark reminder that deep problems require thoughtful solutions, not reckless gambles. Violence breeds violence. Fear feeds fear. Healing comes not from breaking laws, but from building bridges. As the nation grapples with the aftermath, voices rise calling for reflection, compassion, and a renewed commitment to justice that honors the dignity of all. The road ahead is uncertain and fraught with challenges, but also with the chance to learn, to grow, and to reject the false promise that more chaos can bring peace. True change will demand courage. Courage to face uncomfortable truths, to listen to those harmed, and to choose empathy over expedience. Only then can the cycle be broken, and a more just, safer society begin to emerge from the shadows. The experiment may have ended, but its lessons are only just beginning.